Hello. It has been quite a long uh sorry, I've been quite busy with work. I'm gonna start reading from from where I left it off on the last video. Chapter 57. Forget my husband, I'll go make money. Not an ordinary wedding. Instead of the footman, the groom, Tarkan opened the carriage door for Aristine. Aristine took Tarkan's hand and climbed into the golden carriage. The long train of her dress trailed mesmerizingly behind her. Ah, the people watching this sighed in unison. This was a scene everyone had dreamt of, at least once in their life. She was merely being escorted onto the carriage, but it felt as if there was no scene more romantic than this. Once the newlyweds sat down next to each other, the carriage began to move very gently. The wedding parade was set to make a circle around the capital's main road, then end at Tarkan's palace. It was only when that was done that the wedding ceremony was truly over. The wedding parade was a tool to inform people about the couple's marriage, but it also had an important meaning. One lap around the royal capital stood for a long journey, in other words, a lifetime. Arriving at the house where the bride and groom would live together meant that the couple would live life together safely for the rest of their lives. It meant that no matter what happened on their journey together or in the future, they would be together, just as they got home together on their wedding day. It was a superstition, but in reality, it was more like a prayer or a blessing or a pledge. The married couple makes a pledge in front of everyone, and people bless their future and stand witness to it. We'll be getting divorced in the few years, though. Aristine thought indifferently. Although they might arrive at Tarkan's palace without any issues after circling the royal capital, the ending was predetermined. This was not going to end with, and they lived happily ever after, no matter what happened, because I plan to get a clean divorce as soon as Tarkan gets on the throne. Although the wedding parade was practically meaningless to her, it felt strange to see people so cheerful and responsive. Aristine was a princess, but she had never appeared in public. When she saw people waving at her, she felt somehow embarrassed, and it tickled her heart. Their lips were spread in a radiant smiles, their eyes curved in an arc, and they had highly spirited expressions. Even though Aristine wasn't particularly aware of it, her face had a faint smile when she saw the various expressions people had. The carriage was moving very slowly. The royal guards were controlling the area, but there were excited people who were leaping at the chance to see Tarkan and Aristine even a little closer. So the ranks were scattered a few times. After watching the people for a while, Aristine turned to look at Tarkan. He had been acting strangely for some time now. He was being too quiet and looked as if he had his mind elsewhere. In his expression, and his expression was also fiercer than usual. Come on, regardless of what it is, you shouldn't wear a frown. Though there were people who would love to see that. Tarkan, what? Came his curt reply. Normally people would stiffen due to the pressure coming from Tarkan and shrink away. But Aristine drew closer to him instead. She even turned her whole body to face Tarkan. Try smiling. What? Tarkan raised a brow at the random remark. The people love and treasure you so much. It will be good to give them a smile. Your expression is totally stiff right now. My expression is always like this. Despite that, people revere Tarkan because he was charismatic. Still, you should smile today. We got married, after all. Tarkan paused. Those words sounded strange. It felt very subtle and implicit, perhaps even sweet. You, there's something you're misunderstanding. Just when Tarkan frowned and began to speak, Aristine went, ah, and covered Tarkan's face with both hands. Yeah, sorry, I can't say that. Fearsome squeals rang out from the spectating crowd. It couldn't be called cheers anymore. They were truly screaming. People were squealing over the newlyweds' sweet and couple-like behavior. Reporters pressed their shutters ardently, as if they wanted to break their finger. Regardless of their reaction, of their surroundings, the two people in the carriage didn't care. Aristine wasn't used to caring about other people's gazes in the first place, while Tarkan was too taken aback by Aristine's actions. Aristine held Tarkan's cheeks and rubbed the corners of his lips lightly. Tarkan flinched at the soft touch, so he closed his lips. Smile, Aristine. Let go, Tarkan. I'll let go if you smile. I said let go. I said if you will smile. The two of them bicker in the golden carriage. To others, it looked like the new bride was holding the groom's cheeks gently, and they were having a lovey-dovey moment. Their handsomeness and beauty were enough to that people felt satisfied just by looking at them, and seeing such a scene made them feel even more satisfied. But as they kept watching, it felt like a cold wind was blowing from the left. Couples to hell. Ah, no, I shouldn't. This is our hero, His Highness Tarkans. Let's leave our prince alone. The devout singles exchanged secret signs. The happy couple who didn't know what sort of agreement was taking place within a certain religion were still quarreling about smiles. You think marrying you is a reason for me to smile? Aristine nodded confidently. I'm your business partner, and both of us are tied in the same political faith. Wouldn't it be better for us to be seen as a couple with a good relationship rather than a bad one? Especially in situations where our union implies peace. That's the reason? Huh? Aristine tilted her head at Tarkan's question, as if to ask, what other reason could there be? Seeing the question on her face, Tarkan kept his mouth shut. Is this woman numb to this marriage or what? She didn't seem to have any anxiety at all, or any thoughts about the matter. They say that some bridges get depressed before the wedding. But she didn't have such signs at all. Even people who marry for love get depressed. Talk less of those who were in an arranged marriage with no feelings for each other at all. She's completely fine. Yet why do I keep... He felt like an idiot for reacting to every meaningless thing Aristine said. Rather, it seemed like Tarkan was the one more conscious about the fact that he was getting married and lost in thought. And there's that key, too. He never even imagined that the bride would be the one to pull him in. When he thought about it now, it was quite ridiculous. Aristine's slender arms wouldn't be able to make him budge, no matter how hard she pulled. But perhaps he was too surprised then that his body leaned towards her. Aristine didn't let the chance go, and stayed on her tiptoes to kiss him. Tarkan's forehead creased as he suddenly remembered that scene. He didn't know that his earlobes were bright red. Suddenly, he grew very conscious of Aristine's palms and fingers which were holding his cheeks. Unlike himself, who was a warrior, her hands were very soft, without a single callus. Their bare hands were touching at each other. This is no different from a kiss. Aristine's whisper seemed to linger in his ears again. Tarkan wanted to shake off her hand, but he couldn't do it, because I think I'm too thrown off by what she says. Right, that was why. That's the end of chapter 57. Chapter 58. Unlike a normal bride, this woman was thinking about politics during the wedding. So why was he? I don't think there's any reason more decisive than that thought. Aristine mumbled, and hearing that, Tarkan opened his mouth. All right. I'll smile. Really? Yes, so let go of me. Aristine felt slightly regretful about letting go of his unexpectedly smooth cheeks. Then she released her hand, and a smile appeared on Tarkan's face, as promised, even though he was simply raising the corner of his mouth, very slightly. His atmosphere changed in an instant. His smile was wild, yet relaxed, like a beast with a full stomach. It was the first time she had ever seen someone's expression change so much. Feeling amazed, Aristine carefully studied Tarkan's face. Princess, you should smile too. Oh, right. Aristine nodded and smiled after him. When a beautiful man and a woman smile together, the impact was enormous. This is the first time I've ever seen His Highness Tarkan smile. I never thought he'd look at his bride with such kind and caring eyes. I knew it. His Highness' cold heart was melted. With such a bride, anyone would melt. Just when people were watching the newlyweds' public display of affection with satisfied face, ta! A loud nose rang out, and the carriage suddenly tilted. That was supposed to be the horse. The startled horses screamed. The horse quickly tried to run away, and the carriage attached to the horse was dragged forward in its tilted state. The coachman pulled the reins, but the panicked horse only got more agitated. As the vehicle raced forward, still tilted, the carriage couldn't bear the pressure and began to tilt even farther. Aristine saw the ground approaching very quickly and shut her eyes. At this rate, she was going to slam into the floor and have her entire body dragged till she was a mess. No, she might even be trampled by the carriage instead. It's okay. I'm used to pain. She also knew how to endure very well, so it was fine. The carriage tilted over completely, and under the force of gravity, Aristine's body fell helplessly towards the ground. But at that very moment, a strong pair of arms wrapped around her waist. Her falling stopped, and she was pulled back upright. Something warm and firm was wrapped around her body. It was an unfamiliar yet familiar feeling. When she suddenly opened her eyes, she saw Tarkan hugging her. He protected her again, just like he protected her from countless stabbing gazes on her that day. While holding Aristine in his arms, he swung his sword. Clang! A sharp, explosive sound resounded through the air as the connection between the carriage and the horse was cut down. Aristine looked at his sword with surprise in her eyes. It should be a ceremonial sword for the wedding, so she didn't understand how it could cut metal so cleanly. Is Tarkan the amazing one, or is the sword the amazing one? The now freed horse ran straight ahead without pause. Fortunately, the agitated horse only ran forward instead of running over people. She could see the guards who were standing along the road trying to calm the horse down. For a guard, it was a basic requirement to be good at horse riding. So it didn't seem like there was any need to worry. After checking the horse's condition, Tarkan firmly stepped onto the carriage, which was sliding due to the inertia. With that, the carriage stopped. Aristine alternated glances between Tarkan and the carriage with wide eyes. It's not like the carriage was a piece of paper. How was this possible? Especially since their carriage was practically a lump of gold. All of this happened in an instant. The people who were screaming looked at the scene that occurred before them with bewilderment on their faces. Tarkan put his sword away and carried Aristine, whom he had been holding with one arm, with both arms. Well, this is a pretty familiar position. A princess carry. Somehow, she even felt at ease. He had never experienced this position before. But after marrying Tarkan, she was already experiencing this position for the second time. Aristine looked up to him, and Tarkan looked down at her. His golden eyes sparkled like the sun. How pretty. Aristine felt a sense of déjà vu. At that time, their eyes certainly met this way too. It was the moment that Aristine first recognized the man who was going to be her husband. Are you okay? Thanks to you. Now he had already become her husband. People were shocked and stood around in a daze. What the heck just happened? At first, they were startled by the carriage's sudden loss of balance, and only thought of escaping it. However, nothing happened. No, something did happen. After all, the carriage fell, and the horse ran off agitatedly. But something went swish, chop, clang, and everything was resolved. They watched the whole thing happen before their eyes, but they couldn't process it right away. They were only cognizant of the scene in front of them. The hero of this country was holding his bride dearly after saving her from danger. In his wide arms, Aristine looked thinner and more fragile. Tarkan, who was clad in pitch black clothing, and Aristine, who was glowing in a pure white dress, seemed like entirely different beings. The both of them were completely opposites in appearance, physique, and even the clothes they were wearing. But because of that, they looked even more suited for each other. Clap, clap, clap. Someone began to applaud. Even that person didn't know what they were clapping. But with that as the trigger, everyone began to clap. A roar of applause spread around where Aristine and Tarkan were standing. It was such a romantic and beautiful scene to witness. That was amazing. I'm so moved. Their love is so beautiful. This is definitely a wedding that would be made into a play and passed down to future generations. In people's mind, Aristine and Tarkan's wedding was perfectly adapted into a play. Those who have felt touch had tears in their eyes. While being carried by Tarkan, Aristine looked at the people who were suddenly clapping with puzzlement in her eyes. She was truly glad that no one got hurt, and the atmosphere wasn't bad. However, there was still a serious problem. The horse is gone, and the carriage is broken. What do we do now? Aristine asked, looking at the overturned carriage. Despite the state it was in, the carriage was still highly formal. It was still shining radiantly. However, they couldn't ride it. Don't tell me this is because I was thinking about getting a divorce. Somehow the superstitions associated with this wedding parade felt quite credible. No, this isn't the time to be so relaxed. Now this happened, the wedding parade will have to be stopped in the middle. And since the wedding parade was symbolic, this was a very serious issue. This was seen as an ominous sign. As an ominous sign that Aristine and Tarkan's marriage. In other words, the peace treaty between the two countries will soon be broken. That's the end of chapter 58. We just look at the next one. Chapter 59. Now that this happened, the wedding parade will have to be stopped in the middle. And since the wedding parade was symbolic, this was a very serious issue. This would be seen as an ominous sign that Aristine and Tarkan's marriage, in other words, the peace treaty between the two countries, would soon be broken. We must stop such sentiment from forming. The current reaction of the people wasn't bad, but that was only regarding the common people. The nobles and the royals would be different, especially the Queen's faction. See Tarkan as a thorn in their eyes. They would likely ridicule Aristine and Tarkan tremendously first, but the ridicule itself didn't really matter. The problem is that it gives them an excuse to actually attack this marriage. And these people had been sharpening their swords, waiting for a chance to attack. They couldn't say anything bad because it was a marriage for peace, so they could only congratulate the marriage while boiling inside. They must be toasting each other in celebration after hearing about this, and that wasn't the only issue. Just because the people's reaction was okay now, it didn't guarantee that it would be okay forever. Even now, Aristine glanced over the crowd. The people who were applauding Tarkan's performance, because they were moved, began to look around one and one and murmur among themselves. That was only natural since Aristine and Tarkan were still standing there, and there was no follow-up response. By the way, what's going to happen now since the carriage is broken? There's still a long way to go. They barely passed the beginning. Irugo's capital was huge. They couldn't possibly transfer this long path on foot. It would take another half a day, and the people waiting for the parade to pass would be exhausted. Is the wedding parade going to stop? No way. If the wedding parade stops because the carriage turned around in the middle, then one round of the wedding parade signified the couple's married life. In other words, since Aristine and Tarkan were unable to finish one round, it was practically a warning that this marriage would be broken up. And the marriage is peace. It stood for peace itself. The interruption of the wedding parade was no different from a hint that the pins would be soon broken. No one dared to speak of such ominous words. Aristine narrowed her eyes when she saw people looking around with anxiety on their faces. The queen will certainly not miss this opportunity. After all, politics was also a battle of public opinion. They could use the people's anxiety to spread rumors, turning the superstition into a fact. They could even blame it all on Aristine and Tarkan, saying that everything happened because of them. A sigh left her lips. Tarkan looked down at Aristine when she sighed, and he held her a little tighter. To think this woman almost died on the first day of her marriage. She was so small that he couldn't even feel her weight, so it definitely wouldn't have ended with a minor injury. He unconsciously hugged Aristine closer to his chest, as if protecting her. Ah, the people who were gradually getting more anxious was when they saw this scene. Just by lowering his gaze and taking in a deep breath, Aristine looked like the most pitiful and tragic person in the world. In the eyes of Irigo people with huge statures, that look couldn't help but stimulate their protective instinct. In front of them, the hero Tarkan seemed saddened as he embraced his new bride tightly. This too became part of the play that flashed through people's minds earlier. Right. There were always trials in love. It was up to the two beautiful loves to overcome this somehow. Your Highness, don't give up. It's okay, we'll march with you. We're cheering for the both of you. Don't let it get to you. People actively cheered the two lovers. They felt overwhelmed to know that they were participants and witnesses to this historic moment of love. The royal guards and progress managers, who were organizing their surroundings, nodded in agreement and shouted, "Your Highness, just trust us. We will pave the way for your Highnesses to go ahead." The way they said it made it sound like everyone was in a battlefield of life and death, and they were asking their leader to step onto their corpses and go ahead. What is this? Aristine tilted her head. She wasn't sure why, but things were going quite differently from what she expected. She thought their anxiety would amplify as time passed, and the situation would get worse. I guess you truly don't know the world until you experience it yourself. She had been imagining the worst, but for some reason, she felt a lump in her throat. Everyone, thank you so much. With Aristine's thanks, the parade road became a frenzy of excitement. Ooh, be happy. We'll help. People wave their hands, feeling emotional. Seeing them like this, a strange feeling suddenly filled Aristine's heart. Tarkan, I want to finish the parade, no matter what. Until now, he was only thinking of finding a way to avoid a political disadvantage. For Aristine, it didn't matter whether the wedding parade was stopped or not. But she might not be able to meet all these people's expectations, but she didn't want to disappoint them. The new carriage that the steward went to call won't come quickly, will it? The queen won't allow that to happen. The carriage is too inadequate for this wedding. Now the carriage looks better. We can't have the same thing happen again, so inspect the carriage thoroughly. Wipe it down until it shines a little more. Since the horse needs to be decorated, let me take a look at those. This decoration is terrible. Change all of it to something else. Like that, she would just waste time. While using the excuse that she could not be negligent in any aspect because this was a marriage that brought about peace, and the carriage arrived after all, that would be far less appealing. Naturally, it would be compared. When the carriage is replaced with an even worse one after an inauspicious accident, there would be indefinitely nobles who would gossip about it. Still, even if it takes hours, I'd rather we wait than stop the wedding parade in the middle. These peoples were cheering her on this. They hadn't given up, so she didn't want to be the one to raise her hand and surrender first. Aristine lifted her head and looked up to Tarkan. Her eyes immediately met with his bright gold eyes. Can we do that? No. Aristine shook at his firm refusal. Tarkan felt a little pleased when he saw her reaction. Aristine was the one always making him fluster. Now it was his turn. Tarkan transferred his hold of Aristine to one side. Then he made a whistling sound. That's the end of chapter 59. Chapter 60. Forget my husband, I'll go make money. Diana Nim, do you hear the news? What news? Diana tilted her head, acting like she didn't know anything. But in reality, she already knew everything. About His Highness Tarkan and the Princess' wedding parade. The carriage flipped over, so it is about to be stopped. Oh, no. Diana covered her mouth, looking a little startled. Are both of her highnesses okay? I hope no one got hurt. Fortunately, they say no one got hurt. Really? That's too bad. While keeping that thought to herself, Diana gave a soft smile. What a relief. Although they say that no one was injured, information can be inaccurate when there's confusion. Diana was eagerly awaiting the news of Aristine being seriously injured. It will be even better if that pretty face gets grounded on the floor. What a pity. If a bystander had gotten hurt at least. Imagine what it would look like if there was blood spilled at that marriage for peace. It would give people the opportunity to suppress Aristine for being terrible and inauspicious. The more special this marriage was, the more backlash she would have gotten, so it was such a pity. From what I hear, His Highness Tarkan handled the situation very well. As expected of His Highness. I knew it. His Highness is amazing. Diana smiled along with the young noble lady, not revealing a hint of her true feelings. Since as no one came to report any injury, after time passed, what the young miss said it was probably true. It's too bad, but still. With that, this wedding is ruined. Completing the wedding parade meant that the couple would be together for the rest of their lives. But since they failed to accomplish that, the impact would be huge. I probably shouldn't say this, but a part of me thinks it turned out for the best. Young Miss lowered her voice and whispered to Diana. Of course. Diana was expecting the young Miss to say something like this. After all, this lady was one of her followers. But she acted like she knew nothing and made a face like she didn't understand at all. For the best? Oh, don't get me wrong. I think that because no one got hurt, if someone got hurt, that naturally won't cross my mind. The young miss hurriedly waved her hand to clarify, then lowered her voice even more. It's just, the princess' wedding is ruined because of this. When I think about how the princess is purposely summoned down an imp to her bride's waiting room to make you mad, the young miss, scoffed. She brought her wedding's ruin upon herself. Your ladyship, Diana Nim, you said this because the princess is lonely, but is that really the case? It's obvious to me. The young miss pursed her lips. Honestly, when she saw the princess entrance into the wedding hall, her gaze was unconsciously stolen away. She was staring in a daze, then she suddenly came back to her senses. She felt so disgusted, because she thought the princess was pulling such dirty tricks with such an angelic face, and because she was swept away for a moment. She couldn't help but hate the princess even more. To think people were feeling moved, and even calling this the perfect wedding. They're all being deceived by that nasty princess. She felt angry and aggrieved. If she was already feeling like this, imagine how terrible Diana felt as she sat in the same guest seat. Even though Diana Nim is His Highness Tarkan's lover, her heart ached when she saw Diana clapping alongside others, with a smile on her face. She's so kind. She didn't even know the princess was ridiculing her, and tried to protect the princess instead. When her thoughts reached this point, she decided she was going to support Diana even more. But even if no one knew, the heavens recently did, and it punished the princess. Anyway, I heard they are thinking of switching to a new carriage, but will that even go well? The young miss said with a twisted smile, why wouldn't it? There should be many other ceremonial carriages. Even though they might be inferior to the golden carriage, those carriages are lovely. Diana asked, like someone with no bad intention at all. Well, there is enough carriages, but I don't think the queen will sit still. She will delay as much as possible and only send it after His Majesty steps forth. The young miss chuckled. By that time, when all the spectators have shriveled away, talk less of the bride and groom who will be standing idly in the middle of the parade path. That was enough to cool the hearts of the people who were joyfully celebrating this marriage. Who knows? People might even leave halfway. That would be a sight to see. The young miss giggled. Diana looked at the young miss, and an awkward smile appeared on her face, but she didn't say anything to stop her. She only covered her mouth, looking concerned. Just imagining what the young miss said made her want to gloat. She regretted not being able to see it in person. Let's see how you get through this humiliation. A twisted smile sprang onto her lips, which was hidden under her hand. He was the sound was too sharp for a whistle. Aristine tilted her head at a high-pitched sound. Why whistle all of a sudden? It sounded like he was calling for something. It could be. The moment she thought that, the ground rumbled. After a few moments, she could hear the sounds of horse hoofs. Then she saw something running towards them. A demonic beast? Aristine was startled and clung tight to Tartan's neck. As soon as she realized she was mistaken, when she saw Tartan's casualness and the cheering of the people around. The true identity of this demonic beast was a black horse. It looked like a demonic beast from a distance because of the body armor that it was wearing and how huge it was. The horse armor in Sylvanus is so different that I had no idea. The Sylvanus Empire used silver horse armor that covered the entire body, the entire horse's body. In contrast, the Irigon Kingdom used metal and hides of demonic beasts to protect the vital areas. Mobility in the plains was given the highest priority because of the gorgeous armor laid on his forehead and the huge carved horns hanging on either side of his head. It looked more like an elegant and dangerous high-level beast than a horse. Moreover, it was a huge war horse, with an imposing presence that could be felt from far away, so Aristine's understanding was not unreasonable. I think its legs alone are as tall as me. It looked like a completely different breed from Sylvanus horses. So you mean... Yes. There was pride and affection in Tarquin's eyes as he looked at the horse. Aristine immediately understood Tarquin's intentions. Obviously, if he could call a horse like this without the king's obstruction, then riding a horse was the best option. But there was a problem. I don't know how to ride a horse. Tarquin was taken aback and turned to look at Aristine. He wondered how she didn't know that either then he belatedly remembered that she had been confined. She didn't receive proper education, even though she was a princess. That said, it didn't really matter. I know. Since he was by her side, Tarquin had Aristine tied with one arm, and leaped onto the horse with his other hand. As he jumped using his body's flexibility, the cloak affixed to only one of his shoulders fluttered heavily. Although it should have been surprised by its master's rough mounting, the horse remained standing still. Aristine sat on top of the horse and looked down with amazement. It's so high. Her view was much higher than when she rode the carriage. However, she wasn't afraid of falling, because Tarquin was holding her from behind. And that will be everything for today. Bye. What?